Hello everybody, this video is by request. Not the way I originally planned to start off this week. I wanted to do sort of a week of positivity, but a Twitter follower of mine who is very passionate about these issues asked me to please do a video on this subject, more long form than my tweets, so I'm doing it. Now this video, based on the title you see, is very likely to get demonetized. So, taking the advice of another commenter on Friday, who likes the Feedback Friday jingle, I have made up a Patreon song that I am going to sing now and drive all of you crazy with earworm until you become a patron. So here we go. Become a patron. Become a patron. Because YouTube ad buck stuff sucks. The Patreon community is awesome. And you will have lots of fun. There we go. So, and now you can tell my voice isn't still totally okay. But I am going to keep singing that. I'm sure it'll evolve a bit. I don't like the beginning. Like, be a patron will probably sound better. There we go. Be a patron. Be a patron. And this is because every time I talk about this stuff that is super important to equality of all kinds, not just gender equity, but all kinds of equality, understanding these concepts is extremely important so that instead of, so we don't commit like paternalism and the propping up of existing systems for, we're well-meaning, but if you do certain things the wrong way, you end up propping up the very systems you claim to be against. And I kind of pointed this out to somebody who wrote an oddly personal sounding response to a piece on ARC Digital Media by Kathy Young. She did a 5 years past Gamergate retrospective, which I thought, full disclosure, I was quoted in the article. It's quotes that are like, I don't know how long they are, like years old. She got them from me at the time and then didn't use them, and now she uses them now. She did message me saying, is it okay if I still use them? And I read them. It's like, yeah, they still hold up. But I had the unique treat of being hit by both sides of the whole Gamergate crap storm. And so I had a unique vantage point, if the online equivalent of daily doses of your face being covered in flung shit is a unique vantage point. I had a unique vantage point on the whole controversy. Why? Because I dared to be a woman with opinions about stuff that some people did not agree with. Now, just because stuff started off on the wrong foot does not mean it ended there. And there are some regular viewers of this channel, including the person that asked me to cover this, who were pro-Gamergate. Not secretly pro-Gamergate, the way the anti-Gamergate side accused me of being, while the Gamergate side was calling me a polygon shill and some sort of plant, and a feminist so-and-so, among other things. But, what that made me realize is that this was not a simple controversy, because other people on those sides, both sides, were like, I don't agree with this. I don't think it's right. I don't like the way they're treating you. In both warring camps. Like, I want to be clear. And people accuse me of both sidesism on this. I don't treat the use of a hashtag as the same as some sort of social issue. Like, there is no both sides to racism. Racism is bad, right? There is no both sides to sexism. Sexism is bad. There is no both sides to homophobia. Homophobia is bad. A hashtag? Different story. And this is the problem, because Gamergate, bless you, Momo, was I just realized he was there. Hi, Momo. Because Gamergate was a thoroughly online phenomenon, it was very hard to tell who was who. And there were a lot of documented third-party trolls. It's funny because one of the guys that went after me hard was a guy who was then quoted in the FBI report that somebody got through a FOIA request. Like, I'm like, that's the guy? Like, confirmed troll? Like, serious? Whoa, okay. And this is the thing. I was so in the middle of it that, like I said, unique vantage point. Kind of smelly. But I've been avoiding talking about this because it's a mess. And people get really upset. But I don't like the way this rebuttal to Kathy Young's article was handled in numerous ways. And I tried to be very, very conciliatory to the guy on Twitter when he was going on, mansplaining misogyny. Bye, Momo. Momo doesn't like mansplaining. He doesn't like humansplaining. He's a cat. He doesn't need anything explained to him. But I didn't like the way he was, this guy was on the internet explaining misogyny to people. And being too broad strokes, he was basically saying that misogyny sorts women into kind of good and evil and all that. He was just being far too broad. The issue with, and I'll get into more of this, but it is not misogynistic to dislike a particular woman unless your dislike for that particular woman hinges on the fact that she is violating gender norms. That's the trick. And so the example I gave to this guy, Noah Berlatsky, was that, it is not misogynist to criticize, say, Kellyanne Conway, or any of the various women who are, for instance, facilitating children being kept in cages for far too long without proper sanitation along the U.S.-Mexico border. People can object to people being involved with that and object to the people who are involved with that, even if they're women, without that being misogynist. Now, if you call Kellyanne Conway or others a slur based on female anatomy, that is misogynist. If you hold them to a higher standard because they are women, that is sexist. That is a double standard. But just not liking anyone involved in, say, the Trump administration, or if you're on the conservative side, you don't like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. As long as you don't drop into certain names associated with gender, as long as you don't go into the gutter, a simple dislike of those people is not misogynist. And that was the point I made to him in, 240 characters. And his response was, "What? That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. Go away." And he blocked me. So this guy who... And I'll show you what he wrote, but I want to preface this because it's going to make this really funny. This guy who proclaimed himself the champion of women couldn't handle a woman with a dissenting opinion. And people pointed out that he blocked me very quickly and went on to fight with guys because I was inconvenient to his narrative that he was a savior of women. When you're speaking for women in that way, and can't handle a woman going, I pointed out that historically misogyny has taken the form of women. It is bad to give women things like voting rights or jobs because it's too stressful for our pretty little heads. We can't handle the strain. That is the sort of benevolent seeming misogyny that has been the through line of history, which is why women have had to fight for rights so much. And I pointed that out to him. So him claiming it wasn't relevant to what he was talking about, no, that's a straw man. It was absolutely relevant to what he was talking about because he was whole cloth defining misogyny as the dividing of women into good and evil. He just made a hash of it. So let's look at his article where he went after Kathy Young, who... Kathy's a good journalist. You know, she has her opinions, but she does her work. And I can vouch for the fact that Kathy is not somebody late to the party regarding an understanding of what happened 5 years ago. She was there at the time. So even though she's not a gamer, I do believe that she has the right to speak on the online phenomenon that was the controversy. You don't need any understanding of games to watch people fight and kind of observe the dynamic. But Noah Berlatsky takes issue with my girl Kathy Young. And in response to Kathy's article that said, almost everything you know about Gamergate is wrong, and the byline is harassment campaign, misogynist hate mob, alt-right test run, it's much more complicated. Nuanced argument, right? Noah here is, yes, Gamergate was a misogynist hate campaign. Revisionist history about its toxic legacy is unwelcome. Right. A 2-year-long online slap fight was one thing. Why? Because women were involved. And from this point forward, I'm going to try to show you guys how zeroing in on women, especially zeroing in on women as victims, does not fit the definition of misogyny per se, because misogyny is hostile sexism. It is a form of sexism, however, in that it's benevolent sexism, which is just as bad. And in modern times, in North America and Europe, almost worse, because most people know hostile sexism is bad, unlike in places like India, for instance, that are having real problems with this stuff. But in North America and Europe and all that stuff, most people know that guys who just hate women, and we all know some of them, it's bad, right? We know that. It's this benevolent sexism that treat women as either angels on a pedestal or default victims. That's insidious stuff. In part because men and women with benevolently sexist attitudes punish women more severely than men for equivalent mistakes or equivalent lack of following gender norms, especially modesty norms. But also, if you think of women as victims you have to protect, you have real problems when one of them challenges you or is a leader, like what happened on Twitter with this guy. So let's dive into his article with that understanding. Gamergate was a highly partisan political controversy on the internet within the games community. It involved a deluge of accusations and counter-accusations focused on specialized niche content. I wouldn't call gaming niche content. Anybody who calls it niche content is probably not a gamer. As a result, despite a good deal of mainstream press, many people are still unsure about the exact nature of Gamergate and its legacy. So it's worth reiterating the basics. No, it's not. It was an argument online, a big argument online. They happen all the time. It wasn't special, except for people who, for some odd reason, keep perpetuating this for clicks. Gamergate was a misogynist hate campaign. Under the banner of keeping games pure, large numbers of gamers formed online harassment mobs to attack women critics and silence them. Gamergaters deny this. They say Gamergate was a consumer movement. They argue, as ArcDigital's Kathy Young repeatedly has, that there were women on the side of the Gamergaters, which suggests that Gamergate participants didn't and don't hate women. That's actually not the only argument that was made. My buddy Noah here is wrong on that point. I watched the various Reddits, including Kotaku in Action, which doesn't like me much. Like I'm defending here a subreddit that there are people there that just hate my guts and say so very openly. But they, when they did their ops, as they called them, over and over and over again, don't harass, don't harass, don't harass. Don't harass, be polite, be respectful, over and over and over again. Now, some people did not listen, but this was not some sort of coordinated attack from the top, except where the third-party trolls were involved. And the thing is, for a true troll, it's not personal. What the trolls claimed in the FBI documents that came out, and I believe a blog post after the fact, though my memory is a bit fuzzy, it was 5 years ago, what the trolls said is they were trying to show that people who claim to be anti-doxing would break down and dox back if things got rough enough. And what they found was no, people who didn't believe in doxing, who believed doxing was wrong, they continued to believe doxing was wrong and didn't dox people. That was the skin the trolls had in the game. It was a social experiment that had nothing to do with women. Women are just easy targets on the internet because when a woman is attacked, the men around them go crazy. And, trolls are really good at picking at scabs. And that benevolently sexist response is a scab that they pick with regularity. Now, because there's these multiple groups, some of the people involved were holdovers from the Retake Mass Effect campaign that was never quite resolved. Some people were still sore over Gamergate. If you don't know what these things mean, it doesn't matter. The point is, yes, the most vocal, the people who got the most attention, the mouthpieces, as the controversy went on, did end up being more of these culture warriors, the kind of Breitbart types, most notably Milo Yiannopoulos, who went after me and conspired with the trolls that it turned out through leaked chat logs were trying to get me to kill myself. So that did happen. That was an element. But I know, because of my experiences, it wasn't the only element. So were there misogynists? Were there dyed-in-the-wool misogynists involved in Gamergate? Yes. There were people I believe to be dyed-in-the-wool misogynists involved in the anti-Gamergate side. I believe, based on the way he treated Anita Sarkeesian, Jonathan McIntosh is actually misogynist. He has elements of misogyny, based on that Polygon article that said he just couldn't handle it being her show. He got hostile then and couldn't take it. I believe that is a mark of misogyny. Like I said, just my opinion, but I do believe it. These sorts of things. Benevolent sexism becomes misogyny very, very, it's a razor's edge, right? Hello, Scouty. But I saw it on both sides. And I saw it, I happened to see it because I was a woman who didn't take a side. And so both sides thought I was on the other side. It was pretty amusing. There was also one particular participant on the anti-Gamergate side who was physically and emotionally abusing a friend of mine at the time. There was an effort to extract him from that bad situation. So there were bad actors on both sides. How do I know this? I was there. No, I'm not going to say who it is because that might endanger my friend again. That might pop that person up on their radar and, start that whole crap storm up again. I don't want to do that. So no, I am not naming names. Please respect that out of safety concerns. And so let's move on. I hope this is going to be long. I apologize, but this is the way these things go. This demonstrates a misunderstanding of misogyny. Oh, tell me more. First of all, he got the defense Hi, Scouty. Gamergate made, or Gamergate participants made. The argument wasn't that there were women on the side of the Gamergaters. But there were. That was one thing that was said. But Scout. Cat commercial. But the other thing that was said was, look, some people are what a lot of Gamergaters were saying, which turned out to be true, was that there were third-party trolls doing a lot of the really bad stuff. They didn't deny misogyny was taking place. It's just, it wasn't them. Also, they were just harassing everybody who was a games journalist. Trust me, I was one at the time. Ben Kuchera, who I did one article for Polygon and he was my editor on, he was cracking under the strain. Other friends, they went after Stephen Totilo at Kotaku, like Nathan Grayson, who was the guy who apparently slept with Zoe Quinn, just went into hiding for 2 weeks and just said nothing. Like, people on the anti-Gamergate side said they hoped bad things happened to Total Biscuit after he got his cancer diagnosis. Rest in peace. It was ugly all around. It was just, there was some very bad behavior all around. Now, a lot of that was third-party trolls. A lot of it wasn't. A lot of it was people not knowing how to communicate effectively. And I have seen a lot of people since then learn a lot and take the high road more when they have an issue. A lot of the levers that I observed during Gamergate were trauma responses. And this is why I have been so kind to, people who I don't think were bad actors, but I think behaved in not so great ways. Because I think a lot of people were, the people who it was about the Zoe post and not about an ethical concern, they were responding to something that happened to them and putting themselves in the shoes of the writer of the Zoe post. Other people, games are a lifeline for a lot of people. And because of that, they react very badly to feeling like gaming is anything but, as Noah Buddy says, pure. But the purity is not what he claims it to be. The purity is just make something fun. I don't want to think about it too hard. I don't want a ton of heavy themes. I just want something that's going to take me away from my troubles. And for a lot of people, that thing that took them away from their troubles might have been a Tomb Raider game or a Resident Evil game back in the day, both of which had female playable characters. So this is the problem with these Gamergate is a misogynist hate movement articles. They miss the mark. They are not understanding the underlying dynamics, and they're going for the easy narrative, which unfortunately in this case isn't so simple. And oversimplifications don't help in the long run. So let's move on. Now that this entire article is sort of negated because its central premise is wrong, I'm going to try to move through this stuff somewhat quickly and hoping to sort of this be a teachable moment. But this demonstrates a misunderstanding of misogyny, a misunderstanding which, by design or otherwise, obscures and ultimately buttresses misogyny. As philosopher Kate Mann says in her book Down Girl, misogyny is a problem that tends to resist its own identification or naming. That's one person's opinion. Other people would argue that no, misogyny is quite easy to identify. If a man is perpetuating a cycle of domestic abuse, he beats up on his girlfriend or wife because daddy beat up on mommy. That is a cycle of misogyny. That is very easy to identify. And once again, I go back to this fact that people are misusing misogyny. Misogyny and hostile sexism are the same thing. It's that benevolent sexism that is so insidious, that is causing our problems in our modern world. India's rape culture is clear misogyny. We know what it is, okay? We know that misogyny is a fear and hatred of women who do not conform to traditional gender roles of basically passivity and modesty. That's basically what it is. We know what it is. It has a definition. It has identification. Whether a specific act is misogynist is more difficult, but no, we can identify it and name it. In order to understand Gamergate, you need to define misogyny. No, you don't. Misogyny is already defined. I just did it. And to do that, it's important to first understand what misogyny isn't. Okay, that's disingenuous. You don't define a term in opposition. If you're going to define a term, define a term. And this is when I start going, this is mealy-mouthed. This is have destination, create roadmap to get to this destination, even if you have to go off-road and through the trees and drive through someone's farm and, all that stuff, Dukes of Hazzard style. Dated reference. Okay. Misogyny is not a uniform hatred of all women at all times everywhere. The fact that Gamergaters didn't attack all women or praise some women, or that some Gamergaters were themselves women, is irrelevant when discussing Gamergate's misogyny. Okay, almost a factual statement. Almost. It is true that misogyny is not uniform hatred of all women at all times everywhere. Like I said, misogyny is a fear and hatred of women who do not conform to traditional gender roles. Okay? So someone can love their mom, but hate those bitch women that, but the fact that Gamergaters did praise some women, or that some Gamergaters were themselves women, is relevant, because a lot of the women that Gamergate embraced, and I don't consider myself one of them, but I know some of those women, and they were all pretty mouthy. Like these women did not conform to traditional gender norms. They were not sweet and kind and nice. They were gamers. So that falls apart again. Now, he makes a semi-valid point going forward, but I just want to be clear, just because he's right in general does not mean that general correctness applies to the subject. Women are half of humanity. Everyone on earth has women they care about, women who are their mothers, their daughters, their wives, their friends. That's actually not true. There are plenty of people who hate their moms. There are some people who just hate all women. They do exist. So that isn't true that everyone on the planet has a woman they like. They're rare, but they do exist. There are some people who can't have any female friends. There are some people who believe that it is unnatural for men to be platonic friends with women. So this is an inaccurate statement. But he says, if having some sort of human connection with some woman at your life means you're not a misogynist, then misogyny doesn't exist. I completely disagree with that. This is the defining lack of nuance that poisons Noah Buddy's entire argument. Okay? Just because you are not a misogynist by definition doesn't mean you don't have some opinions that, unbeknownst to you, are rooted in misogyny. This does not negate the existence of misogyny, right? If you don't hate women, but you call a woman a bitch because you're pissed at her, that's a charged word, or worse, see you next Tuesday, like the C-bomb. You call a woman a C-bomb just because you're mad at her, better example there, that is a misogynist act. That, except in some working class parts of the UK, is not something that a man is called. I've heard it in those places in the UK. And again, that word doesn't have the same charge everywhere in the world. There's an example there. But in North America, you call a woman that's a misogynist act. That doesn't mean that you in general hate women. It means you have some ideas that you need to work on. And they probably come from family of origin or places like that, which is why I try not to use charged words like misogyny, because I care more about outcomes. Like, if you have some of these things, some of these levers, that doesn't mean, because people are like, well, if I'm a misogynist, I'm a bad person. And if I do anything misogynist, that means I'm a misogynist. No, that's not true. You can do things that could be classified as misogyny that you don't know have that root. You don't understand the levers there. It's just a tick, a verbal tick you picked up, right? And you learn and grow. And this doesn't mean you're an irredeemable piece of crap, who doesn't deserve to live. We talked about that on Friday. It just means there are some habits that need work. And I prefer to work on that. And in my nuanced paradigm, someone can be not misogynist most of the time, do some misogynist things some of the time, and misogyny still exists. So this analysis is just continuing to fall apart, which is why people who are just armchair feminists shouldn't do deep dives in this regard. Do you notice he hasn't defined misogyny yet? He's talking about what it's not. He hasn't defined it yet. And usually people do this because they don't actually know what the term means and they're struggling with it, but they want to be good people on the backs of women. Here we go. Unfortunately, it does exist. That's, again, because misogyny is not universal apathy towards all women. In fact, as Mann explains, misogyny isn't really about the feelings of its perpetrators at all. What? Okay. Rather, Mann says, misogyny is what misogyny does to women. It takes women down for having ideas beyond their station. Misogyny is the system which polices and enforces patriarchy. Okay, this is one person's definition of misogyny. This is not the generally accepted definition of misogyny. And when you have to go this narrow to make your point, there's something wrong with your point. This is critical thinking 101, okay? He is taking a thought-provoking book that attempts to define misogyny and makes some very good points. Like, it is true that intent does not matter if it has a negative effect on women. That is true. But this is not the generally accepted definition of misogyny. This is the definition used by one woman who happens to be a philosopher. Have you ever taken a philosophy course? There are 20,000 opinions on every given subject. It's hardly definitive. Okay. William T. Sedgwick in 1914, wow, okay, said it would be a degeneration and a degradation of the human fiber if women are allowed to vote. This is exactly the history that I mentioned to him on Twitter, and he blocked me for it. So this is very ironic. Sedgwick was married to a woman, but his love for one woman or all women doesn't matter. He was pushing misogyny by trying to prevent women from voting. He was trying to ensure that they would be subject to the will of male voters. That actually wasn't the thinking at the time. It wasn't that women were subject to the will of men. It's that the idea that families voted as a unit, and so women didn't have to worry about it. There's also, just because a man is married doesn't mean he loves his wife. Back then, it didn't even mean he could stand his wife. I'm not saying this is for sure the case. It's just, if you're going to make this sort of argument attacking a female writer for her views on a contentious subject, you better be airtight, or you come across as, oh, what was the quote? Oh, right. Taking a woman down for having ideas beyond her station. This is what Noah's coming across like right now. He just couldn't stand that a writer, if it was just a guy who had wrongthink about Gamergate, it'd be, what a jerk. But the fact that a woman had the temerity to take what he believed was an unpopular position, how dare she? How dare she have ideas beyond her station? Make no mistake, folks. That is what's going on here, because his argument is made of Swiss cheese. Moving on. Similarly, it doesn't matter how people in the Gamergate movement felt about some women or all women. Whoa, that's a big... Whoa, it depends on the women, buddy. The Kellyanne Conway example. What matters is the Gamergaters kicked off a harassment campaign which terrorized women whose speech or actions or presence was perceived as threatening male dominance and male prerogatives. I disagree with the last part of that assertion. Did they terrorize some people? Was it a harassment of game journalist campaign? Yeah, in a lot of stations it was. And I've had fights on my Twitch channel with people who are pro Gamergate about that. Like, no, Gamergate harassed people. Not all Gamergaters. There's that old adage. But people flying the banner of Gamergate did harass journalists, male and female alike. So he is cherry picking here. I can name numerous male games writers who almost quit, who told me they had their letter of resignation written in their desk because of the psychological pressure that came down on them. They were minding their own business that happened to touch on something. It happened to me. I sent in a one freelance article because I disagreed with the negative depiction of mentally ill characters in an article written by Polygon. I wrote a rebuttal on that 3 weeks before Gamergate blew. Much longer than that. It's like 6 weeks. It sat there. And they just published it. And all of a sudden I was a Polygon shill. And my Twitter feed was a garbage fire for 72 straight hours. But that had nothing to do with me being female. That had to do with me writing for Polygon, because the article had nothing to do with Gamergate. It had nothing to do with gender. It was the affiliation with certain entities, notably Kotaku, Polygon, and for a while Rock Paper Shotgun, but that's died down some. Mainly because it turned out that the whole thing that, Zoe Quinn slept with a reporter and he gave her positive reviews of her game, it wasn't actually like that. So that kind of died down. No one really apologized, but it did die down. So this is just the leap in logic here is Gamergate supporters, some, did harass some female game developers and female games journalists. Some Gamergaters also harassed male developers and male games journalists, just like they went after, and I'm not saying this Gamergate thing, just like people have gone after game developers for a great many things they don't like, including the stuff in Battlefield 5. And what, don't you have phones? That had nothing to do with women. Okay, Fallout 76 had nothing to do with women. Gamers pilloried Bethesda for that. That had nothing to do with women. Gamers just don't handle anger and disappointment well in groups. It's something I admit we need to work on as a gamer. I am working with the people that will listen to my content on that. You should come to Twitch tomorrow. They're very nuanced discussions about these things, and I do push back. Ask him. I get rawr. But the idea that the reason they went after these people was because their speech, accents, or presence was perceived as threatening male dominance and male prerogatives. Gamers are men who don't feel dominant. So it can't be a threat to dominance that people don't perceive they have. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of the dynamics involved in the gamer identity. So here we go. As the New York Times reminded us in its retrospective coverage this month, I'm going to skip this whole part because I actually think that it's defamation. So I'm going to skip past it. Going to skip through all of this. But then we pick up, and this actually was the thing, having sat through, having experienced Proto-Gamergate, the sort of weird twilight between when the Zoe post came out and when the quote-unquote Gamers Are Dead articles came out. I did watch the holding pattern until Anita Sarkeesian dropped another Tropes vs. Women video, and people went roar. And what basically happened was Zoe Quinn was asking for privacy, and I understand that they are going by the they pronoun now. I apologize if I accidentally misgender them at any point in this video. It was a habit for years. I'm working on it. But Zoe Quinn asked for privacy. Anita Sarkeesian didn't. So boom, 72 hours is about how long it takes to. It was August 26th that video dropped. It was August 28th, 29th, I believe. I could be a little, but it was like a 48-hour period, just long enough for people to write articles and post them and have them published. That is why they all came out on the same 2 days. It was just the way the news cycle worked. All of a sudden, everybody got to write the piece they were dying to write so they could show what great people they are and defend the women's. That's why they all came out in that period. That led to Milo Yiannopoulos claiming it was collusion and leading a whole bunch of people down the garden path because they were impressionable and to an extent guileless and not terribly informed in media literacy. That is not their fault. Media is very Byzantine, and you don't really expect people to know that. But once again, he claims, here we go. Gamergate claimed to be a free speech movement fighting against censorship of games, but its entire reason for being was to shut women up. That's just not true. That's just not true. And then he goes on, Vivian James and all this stuff. I'm not going to bother with this stuff. I think, I want to just jump to the end and why I'm doing this based on my experience with him on the weekend. That is why Gamergate can never admit its faults or acknowledge its motivations. To do so would make misogyny and patriarchy visible. It would be to acknowledge that the feelings of the oppressor are less important than the feelings of the oppressed. It would be to see women not just as players in someone else's game, but as creators of their own worlds and of ours. And what I'm going to do is a little experiment here, because based on his treatment of me over the weekend, we can replace Gamergate with Noah Berlatsky. And based on his definitions of misogyny, his actions would fit. Here we go. This is why Noah Berlatsky can never admit his faults or acknowledge his motivations. To do so would make misogyny and patriarchy visible. It would be to acknowledge the feelings of the oppressor are less important than the experience of the oppressed. In this case, in his paradigm, I am the oppressed person, being a woman. He is the oppressor, being a man. And he blocked me for expressing my opinion. So that would mean, if he admitted this, he would have to see women not just players in his game, but as creators of their own worlds and of ones that might prove him wrong. And this is why benevolent sexism is so dangerous. If you think of women as victims that you have to save, or if women think of ourselves as victims that need saving, we will always be second-class citizens. Always. And it's, under the current paradigm, not possible to be absolutely 100% sure that you don't have this double standard, because it's really hardwired into a lot of our fiction, a lot of our media. But intentions do matter. Intents do matter. And the reason intents matter is that somebody who doesn't have ill intentions can be reasoned with. They can learn. They can do better next time. They can understand what certain things do, the outcomes. And because, especially gamers, because gamers know what it's like to be stomped on and not given a chance, gamers, in my experience, are especially open to hearing how systems affect people, because they understand this intrinsically. They've been a victim of systems affecting them because of mental illness or physical disability or neuroatypicality or a lot of other things like that. And this is why I go real hard on guys like Noah Berlatsky, who claim to be big defenders of women and you know, attackers of the patriarchy. But the truth is, a guy like him is still more likely to get an article published than a woman like me. Because of that patriarchy, he benefits from it. So while he's sitting there screaming from the mountaintop, he's really not noticing that he's spitting on all the women he claims to be defending. Because, let's face it, he's only defending a certain kind of women, the right kind of women. I saw that flash of fear in him. What? That's not what I'm talking about. Go away. Dude, look in the mirror before you criticize anybody else. You're part of the problem. And I know that's harsh, but I'm just sick of this. I'm sick of this co-opted narrative. I'm sick of guys using women's issues. And this doesn't mean that all men who care about women's issues are doing this. I know some guys who care very deeply and they listen more than they talk on these issues. But other guys, I mean, I know you guys there's people who were pro Gamergate who can quote parts of Lady Bits chapter and verse and who have become like, they know the material better than I do at this point. And they have really learned. And that's why intents matter. Because someone with good intents, if you give them a chance, they'll thrive. If you cut them off, they're never going to learn, right? So I'll leave that there. Hopefully you found this amusing. I haven't done an evisceration like this in a while, but let's do the Patreon song. Okay, let's see if it comes out differently. Okay. Be a patron. Be a patron. Because the YouTube ad stuff sucks. We have fun every Thursday in comments. And I totally changed this song. Okay, everybody, thanks for watching.